If I asked you to imagine a dog, you might imagine one that looks like this, or maybe it's closer to this. Maybe this is the dog that you're imagining. Within the broad concept of dog, there's lots of different types of dog that still all meet the criteria of dog. The same thing is true of other broad concepts like comedy. One joke somebody might find absolutely hilarious, while another person finds it dumb, not funny, maybe even offensive. Player agency is the broad concept that underpins most of tabletop role-playing games, and it's broadly defined as a player's ability to make meaningful choices during gameplay. What is a meaningful choice is going to differ between player to dungeon master in different tables, but for myself, the definition that I use is that a player invested in a situation can use their understanding to reasonably conclude that the consequences would be different if I chose A over B. I think there are roughly 3 areas of the game where players care to differing degrees about their agency. And the first one is in choice of character mechanics, character creation. We're about to start a new campaign and 2 of us are going to play some sort of a spellcaster, and we want the classes, the species, the skills, the talents, the feats, whatever it is that we've got to all add up to each of these spellcasters feeling meaningfully different than one another. Other people really don't care about the choices that they make during character creation. They're just going to use one of the recommended builds because for them, what counts as a meaningful choice, the ones that they are invested in, are what happens during a story session. I want to know that it's going to be different if I ally with the dwarves than if I ally with the elves. I don't want the Thane of the dwarves to just be the elven king reskinned with a beard. For others, the most important expression of player agency is in how they can take all their character abilities, all their spells, all their magic items, everything they've got, and apply them to the different challenges of a tabletop role-playing game. The encounters. We're in a cave, right? And that has stalactites. What if I use soften earth and stone to make one of the stalactites drop on the dragon? What unites all those under the umbrella of player agency is that the player is faced with a choice. And if I choose A, I understand that the consequences are going to be different than if I choose B. In some corners of gaming, player agency is used as a different way, as a cudgel to try to force through their way because they don't like the limitations that are put on them. They don't like the consequences of the choices that they made, or they want to try to control the narrative or the style of game that is being presented. Limitations are the enemy of player agency. No, they're actually a pretty normal part of playing a tabletop RPG. If you sit down to play a game like Dungeons & Dragons, you're already expected to play some sort of a fantasy character. You're not going to play a space marine from Warhammer, and you're not going to play some sort of a 1920s investigator from a Call of Cthulhu game. It is normal for a dungeon master to put limits on the types of characters that you can make, both in a mechanical sense, in a character motivation, the type of character, in more of a backstory sense. Like no evil characters. That is a pretty normal limitation for a Dungeons & Dragons dungeon master to put on their game. And it's actually the default stance of 2024 D&D. I don't personally limit my players from playing evil player characters because I find an evil player character to be a fun perspective to play a game with, but it does take the group and the player that's playing an evil character understanding how to play an evil character while still being cooperative with the rest of the party. A video there. It is limiting player agency to take half of the good evil axis and say no evil player characters, but within the scope of all the good and neutral characters that you would play, there's still lots of options that could be fun at the table. You could play the classic anti-hero, a reluctant hero, maybe a tragic hero. You could even play the classic good guy superhero. It can be done interestingly if you want to give it a shot. Take Superman's uplifting Paragon farm boy personality and put him into a campaign that's about tragedy, torment, making the best of a bad situation, and you get a campaign that's about how hard it is to stick to those virtues in a world that doesn't value them. The reason a dungeon master might put a limitation of no evil player characters on a campaign is that they are worried that some of the players will be uncomfortable with the player character having to do the evil things that would be required to be considered evil, or that the in-player conversation that might happen after an evil act would lead to the dissolution of a party. You and your party are in a noble's manor trying to find the evil cult of Vecna that is lurking below, trying to resurrect their dark god. And there's an evil PC, because while they are evil, they're not cool with some dark lord turning all the world to undeath. You capture a guard, hoping that they can tell you where the secret entrance is to the cult's lair. but you fail your persuasion check. So the evil player character says,
"Just give me 10 minutes with him. He'll give us the medicine."
If you are role-playing good characters, then those characters should have some problem with at least the suggestion of what this person is making. In which case, what do? Do they just kick this person out of the party? In which case, now the player that is playing that character has to go make a new character. Is that fair to them? It might be easier for some dungeon masters to just say, no evil player characters. Okay, but that's like alignment. What about things like character classes and character species and all the actual mechanical stuff? Okay, maybe your dungeon master is setting up an ancient Greek mythology campaign, the time of Perseus, Circe, Medea, and Achilles. And in that mythology, there are no dwarves, no elves, no paladins, and no Gandalf-style wizards. And if that limitation is getting too much for you to find something that you can latch onto and get excited in the campaign, you may have to talk to your dungeon master. All these restrictions, there's nothing I'm really excited to play. I'm not engaged in the game. And I think there's a fear that having that conversation, the player might not get to play Dungeons and Dragons, but the dungeon master might also not get to play Dungeons and Dragons. We need the players for us to DM for the same way players need us to DM for them. For the player, their character is unique and special, and they're looking forward to playing the character they've dreamed of. The world is the dungeon master's character. In the same way that a player doesn't want to compromise on their character, we don't want to compromise on our worlds. It's what's unique and special and what we dream of, even if we're using like a published campaign. But we do need to find some way, if possible, to see this as some sort of addition rather than subtraction to what's special. It is possible to compromise too far. You could do something where a person wants to play a Space Marine in Forgotten Realms. That will ruin the specialness of Forgotten Realms and, frankly, the specialness of the Space Marine. But maybe you could do something in Greek mythology and say a reverse god of war. There are, after all, elves, dwarves, and wizards in Norse mythology. That's from Earth too, so maybe Circe was actually an elven wizard, not a human sorceress, and that's where she got her powers? When it comes to how players solve and approach encounters with their spells, abilities, feats, all the kind of mechanical stuff that goes into solving an encounter, I think there's three things, and the first has often been tread on, but I've got to mention, or somebody's going to call it out in the comments, which is Dungeon Masters railroading players into a specific answer. And Dungeon Masters should not do that. If you want to tell a story the way that you would always imagine it playing out, then write a novel or sit around a campfire and tell stories to each other. That's what those are for. If you want to play a role-playing game, this is an opportunity to collaborate together and to tell a story where we all don't know how this is going to play out until it has played out, and to surprise one another. If the players come up with an answer for the golem that you didn't think was going to be the answer, and you can't figure out within a couple seconds why that answer wouldn't work, then have the golem step aside and allow the players into the wizard's inner sanctum. You'll get to have your climactic battle with the golem another day. You can always reskin it as like a earth giant or storm giant and have it there. For the moment, let the players feel clever about the fact that they solved the golem's encounter without violence. That is a worthwhile feeling, the players feeling clever, in a different way than it feels worthwhile to have overcome a significant battle. Then there's the infamous Quantum Ogre, which I could do a whole episode about. I know there are YouTubers that have already done it. I'll try to link to one up here. And I know there's some DMs that think Quantum Ogres are not a problem. Players don't know what's behind door A. They don't know what's behind door B. What does it matter if I put an ogre behind whichever one they open? Then I only have to prep one ogre encounter, and that saves me a lot of time. And for many beer and pretzels, let's just kill some monsters, get some loot style games, it's not a problem. All they want to do is kill an ogre. They don't care what door it's behind. They're playing different styles of games where it is more about being tactical, finding out some intelligence to make sure that you can approach these challenges that are a little bit more than the typical encounters, or you're doing some sort of emergent narrative, then it is a problem. Imagine the players go to a door and they listen to it, they make the perception check, and they hear an ogre snoring on the other side of the door. Then they go to the other door and they listen to it and they hear nothing behind the door. They open that second door and there's an ogre there. What was the point of making the rolls? You've just shown them that there was no point to try to gather the intelligence. What are they going to do the next dungeon they go in? They'll just start bashing down doors because there's no point in us trying to be tactical and make informed decisions. You've made the choice meaningless. Then there are points where a player will make a choice leading to consequences, leading to narrower choices, leading to consequences, and on until they reach an inevitable outcome from a decision that they made 3 hours or 3 sessions ago. And in those cases, the player can feel like they were railroaded. They didn't see the off-ramps. They didn't like the off-ramps. Whatever it is, they will say, I don't know. I didn't have any choices. I don't know what you were thinking. What is it you expected me to do? You killed the king. And because of that, you're a kingslayer. You're now wanted by the guards. And you decided that you wanted to go to the magic item shop anyway. I told you that there were guards on the street. You chose to try to stealth past the guards. You did not roll high enough to bypass their passive perception. So they saw you. They arrested you. You didn't want to fight them. So they took you into custody and put you in jail. And you're now awaiting execution. You're going to be hung in the morning. You have to come up with some sort of way to get out of this. That's not railroading. That's a result of all your choices leading up to that. While you might get the player to agree with the logic that their choices led to this inevitable outcome, that's not going to address the fact that the players don't feel good about what's happening in the game right now. And the players aren't going to logic themselves into playing D&D. The equation says that this was a good game, therefore I will play D&D next week. They're going to feel their way into playing D&D. I like playing this game. I enjoy you as a dungeon master. I have fun with these other players. I really enjoy the story that we're telling right now. Those are all feelings, not logic. And sometimes that means, even though the players are in a bed of their own making, we have to bend, contort, create new circumstances, provide new options, at least bad ones, in the hope that the player's brain will get unstuck and they will start thinking of new solutions for themselves. Or they take one of the new bad options that we presented to get themselves further out of the frying pan and into more fire. At the end of the day, if the player didn't see the choices, if they didn't know that they were there, then they don't exist. They're going to feel railroaded, even if that's not what happened. In a story sense, there are things that, just like encounters, dungeon masters should not do. This is a definite no. And there's other ones that are like, they're more complicated. They're kind of yes ands to player agency. The ones where dungeon masters definitely should not be doing that is anytime that a dungeon master is trying to dictate to a player how their character feels and what actions their character would take based on who their character is. The character belongs to the player and gets to make decisions about what that character thinks, even if that means that it is going to be a complete change of heart. You're playing a lawful good paladin. After 4 sessions, you catch up with the evil cult of Vecna that is responsible for killing your family and turning them into ghouls. And now you have the lead cultist at your mercy, and he begs for his life. But you decide, if I let him out of it, if I just take him back to prison, the nobles that are in charge are on his payroll. They're just going to let him out, and this guy's going to go back to trying to resurrect Vecna. No, he killed my family. I'm killing him. No, your character's a lawful good paladin. They would not do the thing that you're about to do, so no, you can't do that. Without any mitigating factors, the player is in control of the character. They have the right to determine how their character is going to react based on the situation that you just put in front of them, as long as they are within the genre and the scope of the kind of game that you're running. There just might be some consequences to it, and that's for you as the dungeon master to decide. Maybe the paladin feels some sort of remorse for this and they go to a temple to seek repentance. It might happen, but they might also decide that, no, their paladin has had a change of heart. They think, nah, I'm okay with it. That person killed my family and they're going to do more bad things. They deserve to die. And if my God believes that I did the wrong thing, then maybe I don't believe in my God anymore. They should be able to have their character change and grow. I sometimes think that's why players find difficulty with alignment, is because some dungeon master has made it a straitjacket and said that you must stay within this confine, instead of thinking of it as something that the character may have started out with one outlook and become completely different by the end of the adventure. That's why people go out on adventures. You come back differently than you started. Frodo starts out pretty happy-go-lucky and let's just go talk to the elves and get rid of this ring. And by the end of it, he is so changed that he has to go off into the West. And same things may happen for the characters at your game. And the players should have the ability to explore that kind of thing. And the dungeon master should have the agency to determine what the consequences are going to be of the choices that they make. The god may have something to say about the fact that this paladin no longer shares their moral and ethical outlook and may strip them of their paladinhood. They may have to go and find a different God to believe in. Anywhere where it becomes a yes and to player agency is circumstances where the player's choices, their player agency being exercised earlier on, has led to a circumstance that they're trying to role play out, and they're having difficulty with the limitations that are on them, either because of these circumstances or the nature of a fantasy world, or that the player is having difficulty separating themselves from their character, and they don't know how to express the character as different from themselves. A classic example is a charm spell. Charm person, charm monster, friends, and even in 2024, a spell like Geish. Incidentally, I am house ruling my game to separate charms from compulsions because to me they're different. A compulsion is something that the character is aware that they have, that something has inflicted it upon them. And they may or may not be able to actively do something about it, but they can at least try to seek to redress and address this compulsion that they have. Whereas a charm spell is something that the character is not even aware has affected them until it's been removed. They don't even know there's something to do something about. In 2024 Dungeons & Dragons, if your character is charmed by an opponent, you retain control of your character. That's how it works. It's in the rules. You just get additional restrictions in how you roleplay the character. You see whoever charmed you as a trusted friend and ally, and you cannot take violent action against them. Other than that, play your character however you would like. It's no different than, say, improv theater. Let's say I'm playing Dracula, and someone else is playing Mina, and someone else is playing Lucy. And Lucy, through the circumstances of this improv that we're doing, ends up at a ball alone with Dracula. So I tell Lucy, go and bring Mina to me. Lucy, as an actor, then gets full agency in how she's going to carry that out. Just all the actors must proceed with the understanding that the circumstances are that Lucy has been charmed. Mina can't know about it. She's going to have to behave like that. And Lucy doesn't know that there's anything wrong with what she's trying to do. Continue playing your characters at your will with those additional limitations. If you're having trouble role-playing these two experiences where you have this one being that you currently are charmed by and think of as a trusted friend and ally with your true trusted friends and allies, think of it as introducing your partner to your parents for the first time. These two disparate parts of your life are coming together and they may not get along. Maybe they come from different backgrounds, different life experiences, different cultures. They may not see you in the same light. And you may have to give both of them a heads up about some of the behaviors to expect.
Not many men in your profession, though, are there, Greg?
No, Jack. Not traditionally.
Some people are going to have a difficult time separating what's happening to their character from what's happening to them. Sometimes that's because art is mirroring reality to a very disturbing degree. For others, it's just not something that they're used to and practice with, and they don't know how to deal with it when something like their character is being charmed or their character is getting killed. Why do you have it in for me? No one's trying to do anything to you. Your barbarian in your party just burst in this dragon's lair, and as a dungeon master, I have to play the dragon. And your barbarian is the biggest threat to the dragon, so right now, the dragon is trying to barbecue your barbarian. Well, I think everybody falls to this sometimes and says me instead of my character or something like that. We all know the difference. Most people are not going to have an issue with it. In the same way, they don't have an issue with Obi-Wan mind controlling a stormtrooper.
You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
When Loki mind controls Hawkeye, Jeremy Renner still has full agency as an actor to be able to play Hawkeye how he believes Hawkeye should be played. There are also sometimes limitations put on what you can roleplay out with your characters. For myself, I don't do any romance in my tables. Am I limiting player agency? No, because they can still have those relationships. You can have a player-to-player or player-to-NPC relationship and say you have it. You can make that choice. We're just going to skip over the manifestation of that choice and go straight to the consequences.
You see, phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, phase 3, profit.
I allow my players myself a lot of leeway in what topics come up at the table. They can be very adult, as long as we're dealing with it in like a PG-13, TV-14 kind of manner. And that means that some things are dealt with by just skipping over the manifestation of whatever happened, or using silhouettes, or using polite language to describe what has just happened so that no one feels uncomfortable having to role play out a scene, but they still get agency to dictate what kind of character they are playing. Player agency is the thing that makes tabletop role-playing games the unique, interesting, and engaging hobby that they are. That two groups could start with the same prompt. Goblins are kidnapping people from a village. And at the end, because of the choices the player made and the consequences that the Dungeon Master came up with, the two groups spawn some sort of fractal where they become unrecognizable to one another if you were to compare their campaigns. And yes, limitations can be taken to such a degree that they become a straitjacket on the player's ability to play and make choices for their characters. And Dungeon Masters should not do that. Limitations are also a normal part of the hobby to make sure that we're all on the same page with what's going on. We're all playing fantasy characters. We're all playing sci-fi characters. We're all playing paranormal investigators. We're all playing in a grim, dark universe, or we're playing light-hearted fantasy, or we're playing something that's kind of high fantasy, high magic, hijinks. If you made it this far, then there are buttons down there for like and subscribe. I'd appreciate it if you leave me a comment telling me whether you liked or didn't like the video. Until next time, Dungeon Masters, remember, you're a player too. Try to have some fun.